I'm Max Clark. This is 20 Minutes Max, and I'm going to talk about firewalls. So I've been doing this for a while, about 25 years, and I'm willing to bet that 12 nines worth of firewalls that I've ever encountered in my life have been configured basically the same, which is, a NAT rule. Actually, let's be really specific here because otherwise I'm going to get attacked by some turbo nerds. You're going to have a port address translation rule providing inbound IP address, inbound private IP space access to the internet via public IP, right? So it's PAT, not NAT, because NAT is a one-to-one translation versus PAT, which is a, port translation. Okay, anyways, we'll just call it NAT, not to be too geeky here. And you have some rules, you have some NAT rules that say like, hey, I have a server on the inside, here's its IP address, the private IP address, here's a public IP address that I want it to have, and these are the services I want to enable, right? I need to allow SMTP or IMAP or HTTPS or whatever it actually is, right? And all your policies and your rules end up on your outside interface, allowing traffic to your inside. And now when I say like almost 100% of all firewalls are configured the same way, because there's not going to be rules or configuration limiting traffic outbound. It's very rare to see a firewall that limits rules outbound. And this is why when we get into data center applications, with the overwhelming majority of data centers that we touch and have touched over the years, the idea of putting a really big, expensive OEM brand name firewall in place doesn't make any sense because it's not actually doing anything for you. Usually it's not even doing that, because you're using public IPs for your actual server, servers themselves in the data center. So once you get to that point, you're not doing NAT for, private IP space to a public IP space. Your switch or your router, ACLs, is doing the same thing, can do the same thing that your firewall can do. And you're going to say, okay, well, there's more stuff the firewall can do. Yeah, there's more stuff the firewall can do. It can do VPNs, but you can deal with that other ways. Or you can say, okay, hey, I've got this really fancy firewall that I want to deploy because it's going to do UTM and DPI for me. And I'm going to let you in on a big secret here, which is most of the time that's complete garbage and you're going to turn it off. It's a pretty common universal experience for somebody to decide to enable UTM or DPI or UTM and DPI, so threat management and deep packet inspection. So you're going to click the box and you're going to enable UTM and DPI on the firewall, and then you're going to go like, holy smokes, our network went from being really fast to everything sucks now. Why does everything suck? It's like, oh, I clicked this box to run everything through the firewall engine and inspect it, and now it got really slow. What am I actually getting out of it? And usually the answer is you're getting nothing out of it, because almost everything that you're doing today has some sort of SSL wrapper encryption on top of it, and the firewall is not going to do a man-in-the-middle attack and try to, de-encrypt, like, again, man-in-the-middle attack, like hijack the SSL session on itself and then actually look at what traffic is passing through it and figure out what the heck is going on. There are some that do that, but, again, 99 out of 100 times or 999 out of 1,000 times they don't. UTM and DPI get turned on and they get turned off, right? So now what you've got is you've got a box that is providing a very basic policy engine to do inbound NAT. So for, again, some kind of server or equipment, on the premise inside the firewall and private IP space to a public IP address. Let's say you don't have that because, it's 2023 when I'm, it's May 1st, 2023, actually. We'll be really specific here. And, if you're doing your job right at this point, you've got a metric boatload of SaaS applications. You've got 365 or Google Workspace. You're using Google Drive or OneDrive and SharePoint. So you don't have a file server on site anymore. You're not doing FTP on site anymore. You're using, some sort of UCAS service or NoCAS for your voice, because you've decided just to deploy everything on your cell phones. So there's no voice infrastructure on site. You've got literally nothing on premise, right? I had a client tell me this 10 years ago. He looked at his office as like fancy Starbucks. People have to come in, sit down at a desk and work. There's nothing there. We're just trying to make sure it's really fast, and they really like coming to the office because it's convenient. As soon as you kind of make that mental, leap, right? Now you get into a situation where you're saying, okay, I'm providing really fast internet access. I don't have any application infrastructure on my premise. I'm not using UTM or DPI. And then you get to the next step of this, which becomes, well, why am I spending a lot of money on a firewall? That's a really good question. As soon as you connect those two dots, it gets very interesting and things start opening up for you. And so the first one is, when you look at firewall brands, there is a reason why you want to run Meraki, for instance, and Meraki MXs and their switches, their MS switches and their APs, and you pay a premium. Maybe you decide you want to run Fortinet end to end. By the way, a little weird data point, overwhelming majority of the service providers and MSSPs in the market that provide Fortinet firewalls, the FortiGate firewall product, run Meraki switches and access points and not the Fortinet switches and access points. I am waiting for that to change, but as of today, May 1st, 2023, that is still the case. Use that data point for what you will. observation that I'm sharing here from experience. What else you see? You go Palo. People want to buy Palo firewalls, and they put Meraki switches behind them usually. Expensive, fancy firewall product. You could be using Palo Prisma because you want Prisma access for your remote access. Maybe you've checked the box for UTM and DPI, or maybe you haven't. Now, what is the relative value of any of those brands versus somebody like a Ubiquiti? And Ubiquiti kind of fits in this prosumer category, dirt cheap equipment. I mean, if you've ever priced Meraki access point at $100 versus Ubiquiti access point at $100 versus, a Ruckus, Aruba, Meraki, any of these other players, $600 to $1,000. You might be in an environment where, you need things that the more expensive access point does, or you could be in an environment that doesn't. What are the reasons? Density. Density is probably the biggest one, right? You need really sophisticated network access control is another one. You have a lot of devices you're trying to centrally manage. That could be a reason. There's lots of stuff that goes into these purchase decisions. But the argument could be made of if you're just providing a NAT gateway and or NAT traversal and basic switch and access points, and you've got a couple hundred users at a location, why not just go Ubiquiti? It's really inexpensive. Doesn't give you failover firewalls. Maybe you don't care. Maybe you don't care. I don't know. We have to talk about it and figure out how much you care if you don't care. Ubiquiti firewalls, you cannot have HA. Meraki firewalls, everybody else, you can have HA. That's important for some people. Or you could just bypass the entire firewall game completely and not invest in this crazy infrastructure anymore because it's not probably serving any purpose for you, or it's not giving you what you want. And there are phenomenal services on the market. It'll give you real value. And so the name of the game when you start talking about cybersecurity becomes a couple of things, right? So the first one is pattern, right? How much data are you seeing? What kind of patterns can you glean, right? So you're doing this, good service providers doing this in a couple of ways. They're going to take threat intelligence feeds. They're going to take pattern matching. And this is what your firewall's doing when you enable, UTM and DPI. It has some sort of like signature database it's trying to compare stuff to and say like, this looks weird and send you an alert. Now, when you talk about a really good, I'll use the term SaaS, a really good SASE-based service, or, somebody that's offering a cloud-based firewall, next-generation firewall in a cloud environment where you are connecting to that cloud environment, usually with some sort of like IPsec tunneling, GRE tunneling, whatever it is from your edge, or, for your remote access users, your remote users, where they've got a client installed on their devices, which is effectively, again, a VPN connecting to them. Now you're aggregating, and that service provider is aggregating just a ton of data across their entire sphere. So on the low end, right, they're getting threat intelligence feeds, and they're getting a ton of data aggregation. And then the really sophisticated ones can start doing pattern matching based on your specific traffic. I have clients that do desalination plants, right? So if they're working on a project in Nigeria, it's not weird for their network to be talking to Nigeria and back, right? Like that is a normal activity for them. Now, it might be strange for your network to be talking to Nigeria. Do you have the capacity of detecting that and flagging that? Right? This is traffic that maybe you want to be aware of. Traditional on-premise firewalls are not going to give you that data. You could have a light bulb that's been compromised or your fish tank that's been compromised on your network that's talking through your firewall to a command and control server in some country, in some place that your network has no business ever talking to, and you're not going to see it and you're not going to alert on it. This is one of the big things you're going to see and you're going to get out of going to one of these next generation firewall services, because they see that at scale and they have the capacity and the sophistication to actually alert on those things for you. What are the other things that you're going to get? Secure web gateway. You can take and you can run FortiGuard, you can run Umbrella on top of your MX, and you can run Quad 9. By the way, really easy hack, turn on Quad 9. If you don't have budget for this stuff, it'll get you a huge benefit, for your users. But a secure web gateway, this goes back and like in the good old days, like WebSense, and WebSense was just like a proxy server that was saying, hey, this URL is allowed or it's not allowed, right? And you could create classifications, and their service was constantly going out and trying to classify all the potential URLs and websites on the planet. And 20 years ago, that was more feasible than it is today. And today, modern secure web gateways are going to do the SWG function, and maybe they're also going to do an RBI function, and the ability to actually say and look at the payload that's coming back from the website and saying, this is malicious JavaScript. It's trying to do something it shouldn't be doing, and don't allow it. Or this is a website hosted in a location, or that's a new domain registration, or is trying to mimic something else and it looks fishy, and don't allow it. So these are all things the SWG can do for you in real time that'll help prevent bad things from happening to you or to your users, which would then, other things that you get from modern services are, remote access, and ZTNA functions. And, look, zero trust and ZTNA and remote access is a VPN. You're not shopping for like a VPN versus not a VPN. What ZTNA is doing for you, and really what you'll see is expressed more as like an SDP, a software-defined perimeter. So a really good sophisticated ZTNA and SDP is the ability to create policies and entitlements for access. And the core of this becomes authentication authorization linked with your identity provider, right? So provisioning, deprovisioning, and authentication, in an SSO way, right? So if you're using Azure AD, you don't have to configure anything else. You can say, okay, this user in my Azure is, if you're using OAuth, Google Workspace, SAML, Okta, whatever it actually is, you can plug into these identity providers. And that way, when you deactivate a user account, it's automatically instantaneously deprovisioned across your remote access infrastructure. Okay, so that's like really basic stuff. You want this stuff. Other things that when you're running an SDP in a ZTNA environment that gets you the ability to do is you can start now expressing really rich rules. You can express rich rules that say things like, what's a common example? In order for this user to gain access to resource, they have to be on a company-issued device. And we're going to detect that it's a company-issued device because it's running a company certificate. It has a certificate installed on it. It has an MDM running on it. The MDM is current. It has an EDR running on it. The EDR is current. It's located in this physical geography. So it's in the United States, the United Kingdom. It's not in a location that we wouldn't expect, right? We don't have people in Nairobi. We don't have infrastructure in Turkey, right? They can't authenticate. Nope. The CFO is on vacation and they went to, Romania. That device can't connect, even if everything else is provided. So you can create these, time of day, resources, what's available, patch levels, all these different things. You have just a wealth of policy decisions that you can create, that you can build out a policy with, and then you can provide an entitlement. And so that policy has to be matched for the entitlement to actually work. And then all of a sudden you get access, to whatever that resource is. Is that a resource your ERP? Is that resource your internal applications, your chat applications? Is it a SaaS application? Whatever it is. Other things you get out of these really, really good, next generation cloud environments. When we look at CASB, what is CASB? At a base level, it could be things along as simplistic as, hey, look, it turns out we have really critical data in Salesforce, right? So you can't connect to Salesforce if you're not authenticated and coming through our infrastructure, right? Well, we don't have offices, so we're not going to restrict this to, an office IP address. And also, by the way, just a physical location itself is not strong authentication, right? Because if somebody's at the office, plugged in your guest network, now they have access to your Salesforce. Probably not what you want, right? But how do you deal with this with your remote users? Well, your remote users still need to have this thing that can connect and aggregate traffic and say, okay, Salesforce, you can allow traffic from these locations, right? So really, really kind of core base level, like CASB function. Things that happen that get extended from that point. We talk about, like shadow IT. Like what applications are you actually running? Do you even know? Do you have any idea what applications are running across your user devices? Chances are you probably don't. A lot of organizations give users admin privileges to install software on their devices. This is really common if you're talking about Mac fleets, right? The employee has access admin rights to that Mac and can install it. There's going to be UEM or MDM running on top of that Mac to push your own corporate applications and provide that update. But hey, look, they can still install their own stuff. CASB will give you that functionality of being able to say these are the applications that are running on these devices. You could also, there's scenarios where you could use it to restrict applications. Hey, I don't want this running on my network, block it. I'm having flashbacks to trying to block Yahoo Instant Messenger, so long ago. That application was unbelievably insidious. DLP is an interesting conversation to get into. And there's lots of different things that DLP does, right? DLP could be, hey, look for social security numbers and data that's being downloaded from our servers, right? Don't let that be downloaded. DLP could be don't allow data to be downloaded. Like you can't download Word docs from these things if you don't meet these scenarios. Anyways, all those examples I just gave, your firewall, if you buy a firewall and you do an on-premise firewall, can't provide those things for you, So, if you're thinking about buying a physical firewall, if you get out, and the sooner you get out of this mindset, the better. I started my career supporting on-premise firewalls. I'm telling you, like I would never physically I would never personally, or any company that I'm in any sort of controlling like mechanism for ever buy one of these things ever again. It is worth paying the money, and in some cases, very low comparison money, to get into something that's modern. So if you're contemplating this at all, I'd love to talk to you and help you down this journey. But I will tell you, if you've got somebody that's trying to shove, a really expensive firewall purchase plus support plus their configuration time plus all these different things on top of it, take a step back and really think about what you're looking for in this firewall and what you think you're going to get out of it. And if you're in, IT admin and you think this firewall is going to be great for you because it involves UTM and DPI, you're probably not getting what you think you're getting. And there's something else out there in the market that's going to actually give you something that's a lot better. I'm Max Clark, and that was 20 Minutes Max.